Deeper Cinema presents the 10 best scenes or sequences in cinema from 1895 to 1919.
In 10th place, Intolerance. Gigantic sets of Babylon. It is just an exhibition scene, but it is very symbolic because it showed right away that cinema could have gigantic dreams. Fast and simple 1 and 2 reelers were slowly being replaced by more ambitious directors and audiences. People were ready for longer and more complex films, and Intolerance, for better or worse, was a super ambitious film. The sheer size of those Babylonian sets were legendary in Hollywood history, and they lasted for a while, shocking and inspiring everyone who lived in the neighborhood. This short scene showed that cinema could make people stand back in awe, and immerse themselves in ancient Babylon while sitting in a dark room anywhere, surrounded by strangers.
In 9th place, The Student of Prague. The Mirror Image. In an eerie film, the most frightening scene was one right after Balduin sells his mirror reflection to old Scapinelli. In a well-choreographed scene, Balduin's image leaves the mirror and goes through the exit door with smiling Scapinelli, and Balduin is left behind seeing for himself, astonished that he indeed does not have a mirror image anymore. The use of a false mirror was very effective, such as the use of look-alike actors, and left everyone at the time scratching their heads as to how this have come to happen, and immersing themselves more in this slightly horror movie.
In 8th place, The Birth of a Nation. The Lincoln Assassination. Griffith took great lengths to film this vital scene in an historically accurate way, and it shows. With future director Raoul Walsh as John Wilkes Booth, it was an impressive scene that did make people feel that they have just witnessed that tragic historical moment. It is hard to read anything concerning the Lincoln assassination and still be able to avoid visualizing this very scene, which is a gripping and very realistic one, that emphasizes the tragic loss of a great leader.
In 7th place, Intolerance. Last-minute rescue. Griffith already had ample experience in scenes such as these, using cross-cutting and stretching the final suspenseful scenes to a point of letting everyone at the edge of their seats, and by doing so inspiring future directors as Alfred Hitchcock. This final exciting scene of the contemporary story of intolerance gave an extra edge to this long and uneven film, and everyone bit their nails over the fate of the character of Robert Harron. His despairing face, the ropes at the point of being cut and sealing his fate, the arrival at the last moment of Mae Marsh and his pardon, all were elements that showed a director already with complete knowledge of all the necessary cinematic tools to be able to engage his audience up to the very end.
In 6th place, The Italian. The Attempted Revenge. In his debut in cinema, George Beban plays this powerful scene in which his character wants revenge for the death of his son. His face behind the curtains is one of the first really remarkable images in cinema. He does get very close to do something horrible and unforgivable, but fortunately something that reminds him of his lost child makes him come back to his senses. This is the most remarkable scene of a very interesting movie, that would later serve as an inspiration for Francis Ford Coppola to make the Italian immigrant scenes in The Godfather Part 2.
In 5th place, The Heart of Humanity. Shocking Stroheim. This was a most shocking scene, especially for 1918, even considering that this scene was shot during the First World War. In it, Erich von Stroheim, who played the role of a former friend in Canada, is now a ruthless German officer and attacks brutally the nurse played by Dorothy Phillips, to a point that he actually tries to rip her clothes with his teeth. And much worse was to come, since he later threw a baby from a window, shocking Dorothy Phillips and the entire audience. She then tried to get shelter in a room, and he shot and banged it to also try to make her his victim. Erich von Stroheim got famous for this scene, quickly became the man you loved to hate, and capitalized on that to build a whole career as an actor and director.
In 4th place, Joan the Woman. Burning at the stake. In a very symbolic scene, as inevitable as it was tragic, Joan of Arc finally meets her creator. It is a very well-directed scene by Cecil B. DeMille that added layers that many films dealing with this famous story sometimes let aside. The religious tone and the reactions of that executions all add a sense of gravitas, and Geraldine Farrar's performance enhances all that feeling of historic injustice even more. This was a very good preparation for Cecil B. DeMille, who would in the future direct some iconic religious scenes in films such as The Ten Commandments and The King of Kings.
In 3rd place, Where Are My Children? The Childless Future. Major spoilers here, since this is the very end of the picture. In this film co-directed by Lois Weber and her husband Philip Smalley, the couple will have to live with the reality of never having any children, after a disastrous abortion done by the wife. This scene shows first, in juxtapositions, the babies that they will never have, and later the adults that will never exist, because of the wife's decision, which the husband knew nothing about. We feel this sense of loss, and the ending is very effective because of this. What adds an extra layer to any cinephile is that this couple is played by a couple in real life, Mr. and Mrs. Tyrone Power, but referring to the father of the famous actor of the 30s, 40s and 50s, although Tyrone Power Sr. was also very well known in the 1910s. But his much more famous son does appear in this shot, as one of the kids he would never have, and is quite recognizable, even by then being only a 2-year-old. Fortunately, this Tyrone Power did exist in real life and would be a Hollywood star in less than 20 years after this movie.
In second place, Broken Blossoms. The Closet Attack. Another brutal scene from this D.W. Griffith classic that would inspire 2 other classics, The Phantom Carriage 2 years later and The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, distant 61 years later. The horrible father played by Donald Crisp uses an axe to break the door of the closet where his daughter is hiding. Lillian Gish got many plaudits for her performance in this scene, in which her character almost has a mental breakdown. No one who ever saw Broken Blossoms will ever forget that scene, and the sense of horror and hopelessness that it conveys.
The best scene or sequence of the period 1895 to 1919. J'accuse. The March of the Dead. This is a long sequence that first shows the dead awakening, and then coming to face the living to accuse them of dishonoring their memory, and everything they had fought for. Some people that were spared had done stupid things, or ignored their passing, or simply acted as if they had never lived in the first place, and tried to go on as if the war never happened. This is a harrowing part of this French classic, that shows the stupidity of this horrible war that took so many lives. The accusation obviously stays valid up to this very day, and the sense that so many people died in vain is also eternal. Abel Gance understood all this even as early as 1919, and was able to finish his film on a very high note. He would later do a very similar sequence for his 1938 remake, this time trying to avoid another global war, and not just cry over a finished one. It stopped nothing, of course, but still proved that cinema had the power to at least make people think about some difficult issues. If you agree or disagree with the selection and ranking, post your opinion on the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you.